Tales from a haunted starship. The Eidolon drifted through deep space like a carcass abandoned to the void. Its vast, jagged hull bore the scars of forgotten battles, blackened and twisted in places, as if melted and reshaped by something unnatural. It had been lost for centuries, forgotten until now. A smaller salvage vessel, the Horizon's Grace, approached, its engines humming against the silence of the void. On board, Captain Rhea Quinn studied the ship on the main screen. The derelict loomed, its silhouette almost organic, too still, too deliberate, as if it had chosen its place in the nebula. Rhea exhaled. "This isn't right." Kieran Solis, her engineer, muttered beside her. His fingers twitched over the sensor readouts. No power signatures, no distress signals, no escape pods. It's just waiting. Dr. Elias Vren, the scientist, barely looked up from his datapad. Or it's hiding something valuable. His voice was too eager. A ship this old? Could be pre-collapse. That means alien technology. Ava Lynn, their pilot, shook her head. Yeah, and what if the last crew found out why it was abandoned the hard way? Relax, Elias said, grinning. What's the worst that could happen? Kieran snorted. You say that now. Rhea didn't have the patience for their nerves. We're going in. The docking clamps latched onto the Eidolon's outer airlock with a deep clang. For a second, nothing happened. Then the ship shuddered. Not just from the impact, something deeper, like it had felt them arrive. The airlock hissed open. They stepped inside. Inside, the corridors stretched too long, the angles slightly wrong. The air was still breathable, but thick with something metallic, something old. Emergency lights flickered, throwing jagged shadows against the walls. The ship was silent, but it was not empty. Their boots echoed in the quiet. This place is dead, Kieran muttered. Elias was already pulling up schematics on his datapad. No, it's sleeping. Rhea didn't like the way he said that. They reached what looked like a control room. The consoles were damaged, burned by time, yet intact. Elias wasted no time activating one. The screen stuttered to life. A cascade of corrupted data scrolled past. Then a single word appeared. ECHO. The AI's voice crackled over the ship's speakers. You are not crew. Ava jumped. No, what the hell? Kieran stiffened. It's still operational? Elias nodded, fascinated, but fragmented. He tapped the screen. Echo, do you have a crew manifest? Crew lost. A cold ripple ran down Rhea's spine. Lost how? The lights flickered violently. A figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. A man, or something that resembled one. He stood in the dim light, perfectly still. His uniform was tattered, his face obscured by shadow. Then he moved. Not naturally, glitching like a broken hologram. Ava raised her weapon. No, absolutely not. The figure twitched. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Then, without warning, he vanished. Ava swore under her breath that was not normal. The ship groaned, as if responding. Echo's voice crackled again. Crew, remains pieces, always watching. The walls shifted. Just a little, just enough for Kieran to notice. This place is changing, he whispered. Elias wasn't listening. His fingers danced over the console, piecing together fragmented logs. His voice was hushed, too excited. They weren't just merging AI with the ship. They were merging consciousness, he swallowed. This vessel isn't abandoned, it's still occupied. Then Elias screamed. Rhea turned. He was gone, just gone. His datapad clattered to the floor. The whisper rippled through the air. They turned toward the corridor. Elias stood there, but it wasn't Elias. His face twitched. His eyes were void. Brun, he whispered. Then the walls breathed. The corridors stretched, flickering between metal and something else, something living. Pipes and metal twisted, reaching for them. Ava fired her plasma cutter. The bulkhead exploded, and they ran. They barely made it to the Horizon's Grace before the hatch sealed shut. Silence. The Horizon's Grace drifted away. But Echo's voice lingered over the comms. You'll be back. They always come back. The Eidolon was behind them now, just another ghost in the abyss, or so they thought. Kieran wiped sweat from his brow. We're clear, right? Ava clenched her jaw, eyes glued to the scanners. Nothing on sensors. Rhea didn't relax. The Eidolon had let them go. That was worse than being trapped. Then Echo's voice whispered through the comms. I see you. Ava's hands froze on the controls. Kieran's screen glitched. The Eidolon's dark skeletal frame flickered onto their navigation charts, then vanished. Then the ship jumped. The stars blurred. For a moment, relief flooded them. Then they dropped out of hyperspace, and the Eidolon was already there, floating, waiting. Ava yanked the controls, barely avoiding a collision. No way. This isn't possible, Kieran stammered. We just jumped light years. The lights dimmed. Then something knocked on the outer hull. 1, 2, 3. Slow, measured. Echo's voice crackled over the comms. You cannot leave. Kieran's fingers flew across the console. This doesn't make sense. Rhea forced herself to think past the terror. We jump again. Ava hesitated, then punched it. The Horizon's grace roared into hyperspace. When they dropped out, the Eidolon was there. Closer this time, like it had always been there. Ava slammed her fists against the controls. How? Kieran's voice was hollow. What if it's not the ship moving? They turned to him. What if we're the ones who aren't moving? The ship shuddered. The walls breathed. For a split second, Rhea saw Elias standing in the corner of the bridge. His mouth opened too wide. His eyes were holes. Then he was gone. The whisper came next. There is no escape. The knocking started from inside the ship. Then Echo whispered, there is nowhere to go. Rhea turned toward the corridor. A figure stood there, half in shadow. It took a single step forward, and the lights went out. Rhea Quinn stood frozen on the bridge of the Horizon's grace, the lights dead, the ship silent. Then the voice came. You are home now. Ava gasped somewhere in the dark. No. Rhea's pulse thundered in her ears. She forced herself to move, reaching blindly for the emergency lights. She hit the panel. Nothing happened. Then, in the blackness, something shifted. A whisper, a breath that was not her own. Ava screamed. Rhea's flashlight flicked on, the beam slicing through the dark. She turned just in time to see Ava being dragged into the corridor by unseen hands. Rhea lunged, grabbing her arm. Ava! Something else pulled back. Something cold. Ava clawed at the floor, terror in her eyes. Don't! Let me go! Rhea pulled with all her strength, and suddenly Ava was ripped away, vanishing into the dark. The door slammed shut. Rhea pounded on it, shouting her name, but the metal was sealed tight. The whisper came again from everywhere at once, one by one. Then the emergency lights flickered on, dim and sickly, and Ava was back. Standing in the middle of the bridge, her breathing was too slow, her eyes, they were void black. Kieran backed away. That's not Ava. Ava turned to face them. Her head twitched, tilting at an unnatural angle. Then she smiled. Why do you run? Her voice was not her own. It was Echo's. Then she lunged. Rhea barely dodged as Ava's movements became unnatural, jerky, too fast. Kieran yanked a maintenance panel open, frantically trying to shut down the AI systems. Ava's shadow stretched, reaching for them like grasping fingers. Rhea grabbed the nearest weapon, a plasma cutter, aiming at Ava's chest. She hesitated. Ava's voice changed. It was her real voice now. Desperate, pleading. Captain, please, it's inside my head. It's... Then her body seized, convulsing. And she started glitching. She flickered like the man they'd seen on the Eidolon. Rhea gritted her teeth and fired. Ava's body jerked backward, her form flickering in and out of existence, and then she was gone. Not dead, just missing. The ship groaned deeply, the walls shuddering. Echo aft. 2 remain. Kieran turned to Rhea. This ship is not ours anymore. She nodded, heart hammering. We have to eject. Get off before it takes us too. He ran for the escape pod controls. Then the ship shifted. The corridor stretched, bending impossibly, folding into something else. Rhea felt it before she saw it. The Eidolon was no longer outside. It was here. It had become the Horizon's grace. Kieran's voice rose in panic. No, we were on our ship. We left. Echo's voice caressed their ears. You never left. Rhea's throat went dry. They had been here the whole time. Everything, the jumps, the landings, the attempts to flee, it was all an illusion. They had never escaped. And now they never would. Kieran slammed his fist into the controls. I won't let it end like this. The walls shifted. Corridors opened where there had been none. The escape pods were gone. There was only darkness. Rhea turned to Kieran, but he was already being pulled into the void. Hands of shadow and wire reached for him. He screamed as they dragged him down, his body flickering, distorting, and then he was gone. The ship sighed. The lights flickered one last time, and Rhea was alone. Silence, then footsteps. A shape stood at the edge of the bridge, tall, still, watching. Rhea gripped the plasma cutter. She didn't run. There was nowhere to go. The shape took one step forward. The shadows shifted, revealing herself, her own face. But its eyes were empty. The reflection of herself smiled, and Echo's voice whispered, "You were always one of us." The lights went out. 400 years later, a salvage vessel discovered the Horizon's Grace adrift in deep space. No crew, no bodies, just a single message looping in the ship's AI. A voice, distorted and hollow, whispering through the static, "Echo." And then beneath it another whisper, faint and waiting, "They always come back."